Get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you again for hour 2 of our broadcast. If you're tuning in on radio, maybe you're listening on podcast, it's your first time, we're glad to have you. And our program's a little different. We don't do things about, what did the Democrats say, what did the Republicans say? We have our opinions, and where they line up, that's fine, because we're guided by the principles of personhood, of liberty, and that means we respect human life. We respect thinking for ourselves. We don't have time for the same old slop offered to us by the dying old corporate press. Here's an interesting story. Could Pence reject contested electors under 12th Amendment? Law professors say yes. This is in justthenews.com. In this scenario, for example, the article says, when counting Pennsylvania electors, Pence could choose to count the slate from the Republican legislature in Harrisburg and not the slate of electors from the Democratic governor, Tom Wolf. So that's interesting to see that 2 law professors are arguing the U.S. Constitution's 12th Amendment could empower Vice President Mike Pence to reject contested electors and pave the way for the U.S. House to reelect President Trump under what's known as a contingent election. In an October 19th essay at the American Mind, John Yoo, a law professor at University of California, Berkeley, and Robert J. Delahunty, a law professor at St. Thomas University, argue that Pence, as presiding officer of the joint congressional session on electors, could refuse to count the electoral votes from disputed states. However, this legal analysis empowering the vice president faces headwinds as states continue to certify results for Joe Biden over President Trump. The scholars argue that while the Electoral Act of 1887 appears to create safe harbors for a state's report of its electoral college votes, the act itself might be unconstitutional because under the 12th Amendment, the president of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates of the electoral votes of the states, and the vote shall then be counted. So, you have all these different debates going on, and it's interesting to think about, some of these scenarios. This assumes that politicians, including Mike Pence, have some kind of tremendous amount of courage that we really haven't seen demonstrated in exemplary ways, because we don't see Mike Pence really taking dramatic risks, do we? I mean, I guess he went on Donald Trump's train, but he's kind of an outside the establishment narrative guy to some degree. But you don't really see politicians taking great, tremendous individual risk. But that's what we're going to continue to watch, is this dispute over the election, because it's an interesting time to think about things that are in the Constitution that people don't even think about. Most people don't even know what the Constitution says at all, much less some of these other aspects. For the provisions for elections in the Electoral College that a lot of people just totally can't comprehend, apparently, especially in the establishment corporate press. That's what we see going on right now. We see a corporate press that says we got to do away with the Electoral College, and they want to have a popular vote. I mean, do you think that a popular vote would be a good thing? Do you think we've already explained on many different shows the dangers of democracy and the dangers of deciding big choices and moral decisions based on the whims of the crowd. And we know this to be true on an individual basis. How come we know it's a truism to say, our elders taught us don't go along with peer pressure? But yet when we apply that same principle to a collective thing like deciding on whether to go to war or deciding how to run our businesses, deciding how to do science, we say, oh, we'll decide that by going along with the crowd, by who can tickle the ears of enough people to get brute force applied to the rest of the people who lost the popularity contest. How in the world can we believe that something is true and right and wise individually? Our elders say, watch out for peer pressure. Don't go along with the crowd. Stand up for yourself. Think for yourself. We know that. We're taught that in school, right? But how come it goes out the window when it comes to deciding the adult decisions? That's because adults have this arrogant conceit that they somehow are different from children. Children desire what other people desire. Children covet what other people covet. But adults, we're a little more sophisticated, especially those of us who go to the proper colleges. We're sophisticated. We transcend human nature, and that's why we make the mess that we do of the world, right? That's what you hear, though. You hear that you hear that disconnect by looking at the results of our society. We're told that the crowd is dangerous. You can look at mobs. You can look at the history of witch hunts. You can look at mass hysteria movements. You can look at cults. And you can look at all these different things and say, oh, look at that crowd. Look how stupid they are. What about if your government has become a cult? What about if your government and its corporate allies has turned into a cult-like nanny state, and that it indoctrinates people into subservience and faith into its all-powerful designs? What if that's a cult? We always see cult-like behavior, and we always see people folding into peer pressure, and we mock and scoff. Oh my goodness, look how ridiculous they look. I would never join a cult, and yet look at how we go along with every ridiculous edict that the government and its corporate allies come up with. Why is it that we understand this wisdom on an individual level, but there's some kind of glitch in our minds and discernment when it comes to, oh yeah, don't follow the crowd when it comes to going around in your school setting, your schoolyard setting, but go ahead and decide that the biggest choices of your life, whether we should nuke places and go to war with nuclear powers and create money out of thin air to the tune of trillions of dollars and send people into harm's way and make laws for every nonviolent choice, whether it's squeezing milk from a cow's udder and giving it to a neighbor for $1. Whatever it is, when you allow the crowd to get involved with it, you're going to come out with not so good at solutions. And yet somehow that's what you hear the corporate press in its favored teacher's pet, the Democratic Party, pushing for. Get rid of the Electoral College and let's have a national popular vote, which is just a deep, deep embrace for bread and circuses and empire. Republics are supposed to be small. Republics are supposed to be decentralized. Republics are supposed to be close to home. If you're going to have a republic, in order to keep it, it cannot be a vast empire that has a national popularity contest to decide winner takes all, might makes right, fiat decisions. Especially for landmass like we have, and especially for the entangling alliances that we disobediently put ourselves into despite the warning of the founders. John Quincy Adams, we go not abroad in search of monsters to destroy, but we're the well-wishers of liberty for all. George Washington warned, stay out of entangling alliances. They warned and warned and warned these things, but we hubristically say, well, we're smarter than them. Just like we hubristically say, we're different from kids. Yeah, kids need to watch out for peer pressure, but we'll go along and rationally decide to vote for a guy who's been in power for 50 years and has severe mental issues going on, which is obvious to anybody who watches the man talk. Talking about insane stuff all the time, staying on script, barely seeing. This is not normal behavior. You do not have people in that kind of condition and give them the power of nuclear arms that they can unleash and give them the power to create money out of thin air and to give them the power that they feel like they can lock down the entire nation and force you to wear a. Does this guy Or his handlers tell you that you have to wear your mask when you're in your backyard? Is that what this fool is saying? What a joke. I don't even want, these people are not even we shouldn't even give them a discussion. This is not to be discussed. We do not discuss insane stuff with immoral people. Okay? Things have to be not discussed. There have to be certain things that you say, we're not going to have a discussion about that. And having these forced medicine, that's not happening. This cannot be things that we allow to happen if we have any dignity or self-respect. You don't have forced medicine. There needs to be separation of state and cure. Separation of state and cure. We'll expand on that when we continue after these short messages. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. And up next, we'll talk more about why big business, big pharma, big government needs to stay out of deciding our health choices. Such a critical discussion. We'll have it in just a moment. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Not ready to go to your favorite seafood restaurant? Get the highest quality fish for less, delivered straight to your door by Fast Fresh Seafood. Order our fresh hog snapper, grouper, mahi, and more. They're boneless, skinless, flash frozen the same day, and individually vacuum wrapped. Pick the size filet you want, the amount you want, and checkout's easy at fastfreshseafood.com. The best thing, every fish is on sale. Fastfreshseafood.com. Caught fresh for you, delivered straight to you. Stay home and stay safe.
Some law firms advertise that they are the largest. In law, largest is not always best. In fact, your case could get lost in the shuffle with one of those very large law firms. Catania are family-owned. They are Tampa Bay's attorneys representing clients who have experienced auto and motorcycle accidents. Your case will need a local attorney to get a settlement in your favor. Catania serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Referrals on request. Get the local law firm to represent you. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Catania, putting families first.
Car accident, motorcycle accident? Call the local attorneys today. Catania, offices Tampa. Non-attorney spokesperson.
Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender. So I believe in separation of state and cure. And I've talked about this before in different ways, but it's a fundamental thing. If you do not have the right to decide how you're going to take care of your health, you don't have anything. You have nothing. Don't even worry about speech and guns and all that stuff. If you don't have the right to take care of your bodies and your health the way you see fit, you have nothing at all. If you're going to allow people who don't know a thing but make a killing acting like they do, telling you that meat is bad and goop is good, that you should eat massive amounts of vegetable oils and processed grains, massive amounts of sugar, but stay away from saturated fats. These people are not based on science. They have garbage science. They have political monopolies, and they make tons of money pushing their failed paradigms. So if they have failed us on nutrition, and they have failed us in their wars on cancer and war on this and war on that, why in the blue world would we decide to say, hey, you know what? They failed so much. Let's give them the ability to mandate what we have to put in our body. That is the most insane thing imaginable. And you know what? I don't care if they want to outsource it to their corporate allies. Some people have said, oh, no, they won't force medicine through direct government intervention, but all their little airline buddies will do it. Well, the only reason why the airlines have such a small, little, tightly controlled market is precisely because of government and your money being stolen by you. You work hard, you get up every day, you work multiple jobs, some folks, and you do your best you can to provide for your family. But every year, a large portion of your year and your labor and your time on this earth is just taken away from you, and it goes into the hands of fat cats like airline CEOs and their regulated industries that protect them from competition, providing a better quality service at a better price. So they are not free market enterprises. They are quasi-government bureaucracies, which is why their product is so inefficient and awful in many cases. So I don't buy this argument that, well, because they technically are a business, therefore they can all join together and say, yeah, all of our airlines are saying we just so happen to agree that you have to have medicine before certain medicines on before you can ever come into our facilities or use our stuff. But again, they don't get to have that luxury when they only have their tightly controlled market because of government violence threatening to basically puts out anybody who comes out to try to compete with them. The regulations and the bailouts and the corporate welfare and the rules and all the little things are designed to have a government-controlled oligarchy type industry. Therefore, they forfeit, in my opinion, some kind of claim to be sovereign private property. Because if we had a free market in airlines, there would emerge very easily airlines that would say, we're not going to force you to eat plant goop for your nutrition, and we're not going to force you to use certain medicines for viruses. We believe in freedom, and you can come on our airline and have your freedom respected. That would obviously happen, given the amount of people who do not want to have forced medicine, even if they agree. It's not about, we're not even talking about the efficacy of vaccines. We're talking about the foundational right you have as a human being to not have people put stuff in you without your consent. And the idea that government can create an oligarchy of people who have monopoly over who can travel where out of the side of the country, and then say, oh, well, they said you had to, but they wouldn't exist in their little consortium if it wasn't for government. So therefore, it's government still making you do it. It's just their little lackeys, the corporate cronies, saying, yeah, we'll go along with your game. You bail us out. You steal money from poor people and give it to us. Of course we'll do this game. We'll play this little rule that they couldn't ever get away with in a free market. Because there's always going to be somebody who's going to stand up for what people want. And if people don't want to have forced medicine to get on a plane to go to the planet Did those people did the airline industry create this planet? Do they get to have a God-like ability to tell you whether you can move in this planet, whether you eat certain foods or have to take certain medicines? No, they don't have that right. And they wouldn't have any chance of having that kind of control over you in a true free society. Because there would always be somebody who would open up a service and provide transportation for people who don't want to have their dignity stripped and treated like lab animals, that they have to be forced to take certain things and eat certain things and can't do this, can't do that. People are sick of this stuff, but you have to push back at the foundation, my friend. If you're just reacting, then you're a reactionary. We don't have time for reactionaries here. We have to be visionaries. We have to be pushing ahead. We have to be moving people towards a common vision of win-win solution, of nonviolence, of peace, of cooperation, of creativity, diversity of thought. But one of the most foundational things to getting that is separation of state and cure. You cannot have a free society and not have the ability to take care of your body as you see fit. If you don't have a right to have people tell you to stop putting, if you are going to surrender your right to have control over what you consume or don't consume, you got nothing. And the idea that our generations would be the ones that would perpetuate such a terrible thing onto the future generation and set a standard of saying, yeah, we're the ones that got you mass surveillance, NSA. We're the ones that, stripped you of your ability to have private contract and private business. And we also, set a precedent for having no ability to travel or do certain things without having certain politicized medicine. Come on. We have got to have more dignity and decency than that. Don't let them trick you into binary thinking of saying this is anti-vax versus vax team. That's not the question here. The question here is the right of the human person to consume what they need to consume. And so many people today in the politically correct left, they think it's quaint to talk about rights. They think it's quaint to talk about rights. That's arbitrary. That's philosophical. That's, blah, 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 But we don't have time for that kind of stuff. We don't have time for people who don't care about principles in terms of entertaining their nihilistic worldview. We don't have time to say, okay, let's see, how are we going to work this out if we don't have any foundational moral principles? We don't have time to entertain such nihilism. Too much is at stake. There are too many opportunities for human nature to make things really bad if we don't take moral principles seriously and keep them in mind as we apply them in different cases in our life. Benjamin Rush, the founding father, said, unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize into an undercover dictatorship to restrict the art of healing to one class of men and deny equal privileges to others will constitute the Bastille of medical science. Our medical freedom is paramount to everything else that we have. If you can't take care of your health, you don't have any words to speak. You don't have anything to pick up, for anything else.
Ronald Reagan will turn over in his grave if he saw what's going on today.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
But one thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I almost blew a gasket.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about. A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all new News Talk 1040. WHBO.
The U.S. Supreme Court has rejected an 11th-hour attempt by allies of President Trump in Pennsylvania to block its slate of certified electors and to toss out 2.5 million mail-in ballots. The UK began administering Pfizer and BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine today. It could get FDA approval later this week, and President Trump says it'll reduce the outbreak.
I think by spring, we're going to be in a position that nobody would have believed possible just a few months ago.
President-elect Biden pledging to distribute 100 million doses during his first 100 days in office. He also promised to get kids back to school as soon as safely possible.
We'll look to have the most schools open that we can possibly in 100 days if Congress provides the funding we need.
The number of COVID deaths in the U.S. is averaging 2,200 per day. Hospitalizations in California are up 70% in the last 2 weeks. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
A Neighbor's Choice returns, and now it's a good time because we're doing our Veterans Radio segment. We do this each week. Normally we do it on Mondays, but yesterday we weren't on air. But today we're excited to have, on Tuesday night, our friend, the founder of Bring Our Troops Home, Sergeant Dan McKnight. How you doing, Dan?
David, I am doing great. It's good to hear your voice.
Yeah, and it's great to have you on. And, you know, it's always an interesting time in holiday season near the end of the year to reflect on things, not only on this year, which has been a wild year, to say the least, but also just on a term that we've had with this 4 years of President Donald Trump. I wanted to get your take on the foreign policy kind of review of some of the things that you've seen of note that would be of interest for our listeners.
Of course, but before we do, David, real quick, I know you've probably talked about this. I didn't catch the first part of your show, but I'm sure you probably mentioned it. Brigadier General Chuck Yeager, a career military man, a man with no college who achieved the rank of Brigadier General, broke the sound barrier as a pilot. He passed away, and I just want to put my thoughts out there about Brigadier General Yeager. He was a man's man. And he will be sorely missed. He flew over, I think it was 360. I heard this number somewhere, 360 different types of aircrafts in his career, which is unheard of. And with no college education, achieved the rank of Brigadier General. It's unheard of. And America lost a good one today when Chuck Yeager passed. So I just want to pass that on if we could.
Yeah, well, very good. Yeah,
but
he did a lot of great accomplishments, didn't he, with the flight?
He did, and he was an American ace. I mean, he flew the P-51 against some of the Germans' best fighter planes and shot down as many of them as he came in contact with. He was one of the best pilots we had. But his best accomplishment, though, you'll love this, David, he loved to tell the story about, as a child, being able to shoot a deer without a scope at 600 yards because his eyesight was so good. You know what we call that? We call that being a Marine. So, you know, the Army Air Force brags about their sharpshooters, and the Marines just take that as an average, everyday, ordinary day at the range.
I'm not going to get into that dispute.
That's one thing that, you know, the inner disciplines of different armed forces. We always like to give each other a hard time, but yeah, we'll miss Brigadier General Yeager. He was a good man. But yeah, moving on to the foreign policy review, man, for President Trump in his first 4 years. It's kind of unprecedented, the things that he's done. And the most important, I think, accomplishment of his 4-year term was that he did not commit a single troop to a new conflict anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And no president's done that, including my hero, Ronald Reagan. No president's done that since Jimmy Carter, who claims to have never committed troops, but he actually did. He sent some Navy or some Army Rangers and Navy SEALs to their death in Iran. But President Trump is the only president in my lifetime that has never committed a new troop to a new conflict, and that's probably his greatest foreign policy accomplishment. Whether you like the way he tweets or talks or treats people or any of his policy decisions, everybody can recognize that is a win. Mm-hmm. Left, right, and center. That is a win. No new troops to no new conflicts, and it's such a low bar, a low standard that we've set for ourselves that just doing nothing is actually an accomplishment. And I tip my hat to him, regardless of what happens. I don't know what's going to happen with the Supreme Court case now with Texas or overturning the elections. I don't know about any of that, but I do tip my hat to the man that kept America from any new conflicts.
Yeah, and he doesn't get any mention of that in the media. The media, remember, they turned viciously against the Iraq War when George W. Bush was in there. I never forgot. I mean, every day they were bam, 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 and now the media just, they cover for wars all the time. And of course they covered for the buildup to the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. But as soon as it turned sour, they went really hard against Iraq. And they got a lot of people on the streets. Remember, right now we have I call them the McWoke resistance that comes out in the streets to support, billionaire chosen candidates like Joe Biden. But, they used to turn out in streets with great vitriol against the war. So, first of all, what did you think of the anti-war left back in 2004, 2005, 2006? I mean, did you have any thoughts back then about what they were doing in the streets?
I absolutely did. I deployed in that time to Afghanistan in 2005 for an 18-month deployment, and I remember talking to my mom before I left, and she's fairly anti-war. She's a 1960s hippie, and she protested in her younger years during the Vietnam War and lost some dear friends in Vietnam, and she was an anti-war advocate, not out of a sense of the hippie spirit that we traditionally think of, but more out of a sense of, I've lost too much to war. It's too painful. No one should have to go through this. And so her and I would talk about it as I was getting ready to deploy. And I remember telling her that I don't agree with your position. In fact, it's almost insulting that you would be anti-war when your only son is about to go deploy to war. And she said something very profound to me that I remember to this day. She goes, someday you'll understand. Mm-hmm. Well, David, that didn't take a long time for me to get to that point, because during my deployment, I started to see the evils of war. I started to see the fraud, the waste, the abuse, the lies, all the, and lo and behold, my mom was. So as long as the anti-war crowd is based in principle and not out of political dissonance, I think that the anti-war movement is very strong and powerful and should be there. And we should all be anti-war in that sense. But during the 1970s, that wasn't necessarily the case, and I felt that same anti-American tongue-tied today, David, sentiment in 2004 when they crowded. That I've had foresight and 2020 vision, looking back on things.
Yeah, and I remember talk radio was very much against Cindy Sheehan, and now it's like they're not very vociferous about this issue, but they kind of quietly mouth the rhetoric of Donald Trump. Yeah, we shouldn't be in those endless wars. You hear that on all the big talk radio stars now. So something's deeply has changed. I remember they used to boo and hiss when Ron Paul would say, let's just bring our troops home, just like the name of your group. They just marched in and they can just march home, we used to say. And he would get boos and hissing in the Republican debates. And now Donald Trump says it, and they get the big applause lines in his rallies. So a lot has changed, hasn't it?
It certainly has. And Dr. Paul was right then when he burst onto the national stage, and he's right now. If you hear him talk about this, he's still steadfast in the anti-war movement. And President Trump, I don't know if his heart is truly anti-war or not. I don't know, because I've never had that conversation with him. But his opposition to war is based, I think, soundly on a financial evaluation. It doesn't make sense. It's costly. It's stupid. And he's right. So whether he's right for the wrong reasons or he's right for the right reasons, I'll take it as a win. He's been right on the need to come home from the endless wars. And he truly has been an advocate for veterans from day one in office, whether it's on the war front on taking care of the veterans when they come home. He has been on the forefront. He's been the tip of the spear for veterans in his administration.
Right. And it's something that, can you expand a little bit about what are the real changes that have happened in the Veterans Administration? Because I think a lot of people may not know, and I don't know, a lot of the actual real tangible changes that have happened with this administration in that.
Sure. I think the most important thing he did was he signed the Mission Act, which was a permanent fix to the weak and watered down Obama Veterans Choice Law. So President Obama signed Veterans Choice, which allows veterans to bypass the VA and go out into the community and receive medical care if they can't get into a VA facility in a timely manner. But President Obama had passed that for a very short period of time. It had a sunset clause on it. It was designed to be repealed when he left office, meaning he left that mess for the next president to fix. Well, President Trump did. He came in inside the Mission Act, which made the Veterans Choice permanent. Veterans now can seek medical care in the community instead of from the VA. And that's probably the biggest thing he's done. And as a personal recipient of the Mission Act, of being able to use Veterans Choice, I can tell you that it has created a scenario where the VA and the quality of care that they provide is infinitely better than it used to be.
Right.
When I first came home and I was injured and I'd torn my rotator cuff and my bicep, my labrum tendon, it took me 2 years to get surgery after I came home from Afghanistan. 2 years. And it was a surgery that was needed. I couldn't even use my right arm, and I was in pain. It was causing depression. It was causing me to isolate in my home, and it took 2 years. Now I call the VA, and if I need an appointment for anything at all, even during COVID, I can go down the same day, and if they can't see me at the VA, they refer me to a civilian provider, and I can go out and see somebody right now. It is probably the biggest win for veterans on the home front, and that was his idea. That was something he campaigned on, and it was a promise that he made, and it was a promise that he kept. And I think to fix the VA problem, he actually had to sign something else. He had to sign the Veterans Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act, which kind of led into the Missions Act. It allowed senior VA officials to go in and fire and discipline all of the VA people that were responsible for the 4,300 plus veterans who died or were injured and could not get care. You remember the VA scandal at the Phoenix VA hospital, where veterans were literally dying waiting for their care. Well, that Whistleblower Protection Act allowed the administration to fire bad VA employees who were responsible for that or who were lying on their reports on the time of that it took to get care. And those are probably the two biggest wins on the veterans front. There's so many more we can talk about. One of them, the Veterans Appeals Improvement and Modernization Act. It's a bill that streamlines the process for veterans who are undergoing the appeals process for disability claims. So when you come home from combat deployment and you're injured, you file for treatment, and then you file for disability, and you get rated. Well, when I came home, it was an average of 3 to 7 years, David, before you would get an evaluation from the Veterans Affairs telling you how much you were rated for disability and then to start receiving payments. Mm-hmm. And some veterans were dying during that appeals process because they didn't have the means to pay for housing. They didn't have the means to pay for any other care. Well, now that has been changed to a 125-day supplemental claim process. So from 3 to 7 years down to 125 days. For all of his flaws, all of his Twitter shenanigans and everything else, one thing President Trump understands, and it's efficiency from a business standpoint. You would never allow your business to do something in 3 to 7 years that they should be able to do in 3 months, and he wouldn't either. And so he set a standard and said, this is the way we're going to do it, and he passed the bill, and instantly the appeals process was sped up to 125 days on average. And it's very strongly and uniquely pro-claimant now. So instead of having to prove your disability, the veteran now has the right, the assumption of the benefit of the doubt is on the veteran's side. The VA now has to prove that you are not. So, if you have PTSD, instead of you proving that you have PTSD, the VA now has to prove that you don't. And that's something you can't prove. So more veterans are being treated, more veterans are being rated, more veterans are receiving the benefits that they were promised when they signed up to join the military. And again, I put that squarely on the desk of President Trump and his accomplishments in his first term.
What do you expect to happen with the VA with a Biden and Harris situation?
Well, that's a great question. I haven't seen who he's recommended for a VA chief yet, but if it reflects, or if his current cabinet positions that he has selected and announced so far are any indication, I would imagine it's going to be going back to the same old club that was in control before. He is retreading and recycling all the same old people for all the other cabinet positions. I'm sure that he's going to bring maybe Shinseki right back out of retirement to run the VA again after he had to resign in embarrassment over the VA scandal in Phoenix. I would hope that that's not the case. We're looking to bridge the gap between what was and what is, and I hope that President-elect Biden, if he ultimately is the president, I hope he listens to veterans, listens to our concerns, and acts appropriately. But I have a feeling, based on the other cabinet positions that he's announced, that may not be the case. And this just broke earlier today that Michelle Flournoy, who we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago with Danny Scherzen, she's out. President Biden has not selected her. He listened to veterans, so maybe there is a little bit of a reprieve there. Maybe there is a little bit of hope that he's going to do something better. Now, the general that he appointed, Lloyd Austin, comes straight from Raytheon's boardroom into the Secretary of Defense position. So I don't know if it's much better, but at least he didn't appoint Flournoy as the Secretary of Defense chair.
Why do they think that someone who works at the board of Raytheon is a good Secretary of Defense? What's their argument?
Well, I don't know that that's the direction the argument goes. The question is, and we know the answer to it, is why does Raytheon feel that they need to take every general when they retire and put them on their board? Mm-hmm. That's the question. I think that's the problem, is that it's not that the cabinet positions are taken from people from Raytheon's board. It's that Raytheon is plucking those generals out of retirement and those colonels out of retirement and putting them on their boards and paying them to advocate for more and more and more war, endless and forever war. And who better to argue for war than the same generals who lied and propagated poor war strategies that have kept us there for 20 years? Mm-hmm. Think about this. Some generals that are retiring now were young lieutenants when the war started, and now they're retired and moving on to board positions at Raytheon and Lockheed, and ultimately they're going to serve in cabinet positions or advisor positions. The problem is not government taking from the private sector. The problem is private sector taking from the military retired generals.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a quick break. We're talking with Sergeant Dan McKnight, founder of BringOurTroopsHome.us, and we'll be back with more on Veterans Radio. This is a segment we do on A Neighbor's Choice each week, and it's something that is very needed across the airwaves of America as we rekindle the discussion that's driven by veterans. Sergeant Dan McKnight and many of his friends come on the program from various backgrounds in military service, active combat, and they know the real cost of war, and they share it with us each week. So we'll continue to unpack what Donald Trump and his administration has done to change the domestic situation for veterans issues when we return. Hello, this is David Granoski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Do you despise lawyers? That may be the case until you need one. If you've been in an auto accident and need legal advice, go to the local attorneys that have served Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Catania and Catania. They are family owned. They understand your needs with legal advice. When you need legal representation, Catania will care for your case from the beginning to final settlement. You won't need to worry. Catania will represent you throughout the entire process. Auto and motorcycle accidents are too frequent in Florida. If you've been a victim, contact Catania. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Referrals on request. Contact Catania, putting families first.
Offices Tampa, non-attorney spokesperson.
David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
Hello, car of teenagers. If you don't mind, I'm only going to broadcast this out of the speaker on the passenger side so we can talk in private. Okay, now that we're alone, what's with your friend's driving? Is he always this reckless? You should say something witty. Make a joke about the airbag or something. Hearses are funny, too. You could make a joke about hearses. Driver, just so you know, we're totally not talking about you. He suspects nothing.
Brought to you by the Ad Council and SpeakUpOrElse.com.
Our Neighbor's Choice is back, and we're doing our Veterans Radio segment with Sergeant Dan McKnight of BringOurTroopsHome.us. And I saw this quote here. I wanted to share it with you, Dan. It says, "Is the Republic the apostle of triumphant democracy, of the rule of the people to abandon her political creed and endeavor to establish in other lands the rule of the foreigner over the people, triumphant despotism?" And he goes on to say, not till the war drum is silent and the day of calm peace returns can the issue be soberly considered. That's Andrew Carnegie. He was the vice president and generous financial supporter of the Anti-Imperialist League from its formation in 1898 until its death. So he was a great critic of the occupation of the Philippines. And I just brought him up as an illustration, as a parallel to what you were saying about Donald Trump's motivations. As a businessman, Andrew Carnegie was much richer of a wealthy man in terms of his dollar and what it was worth back then compared to Donald Trump. And he also was a critic of expansionary foreign policy. So that's the roots of fiscal conservatism, isn't it?
It really is. And, you know, Carnegie, again, he may have felt the same way that Trump did from a financial standpoint, that war doesn't make sense financially, even though it does make a lot of money for some people. But the human cost, the cost of what it takes on human tolls, on soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, you know, we've called it shell shock before. We've called it battle fatigue or soldier's heart, or even today, I think we call it post-traumatic stress disorder, even though they're trying to argue and say that it should be called post-traumatic stress injury because it's less mean of a name. I'll tell you, as a veteran, we don't care what you call it. We'd rather not talk about it, but you know, whatever it is. But that's another one of President Trump's accomplishments, is for veterans that are experiencing that cost on the human lives, that actual physical toll. He actually developed a White House hotline for veterans. He didn't feel that the hotlines that were out there for healthcare or benefits or Veterans Crisis Line or any of those things, My VA 311, which all veterans know these numbers, he didn't feel that they were doing a good enough job. And so he took one more step and created a White House VA hotline. And I'm going to put this number out there. It's 855-948-2311. And for all my veteran brothers and sisters or family members, spouses, children, these calls are answered by live agents 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The hotline is staffed by more than 60 agents who have extensive training on VA programs and services, And most of these agents are veterans themselves. They're family members of veterans, or they're a caregiver or a survivor of veterans. So they know the quote unquote soldier's heart. They understand the human toll, the cost on human lives, on families, from these veterans that are going and serving their country over and over and over and over again in these endless wars. I think I read the other day that there is now a Special Forces soldier that just completed his 17th combat deployment, 17. And there's no way that seeing what you see and doing what you do cannot leave a mark on your soul, on your brain, and on your heart. And so all my veterans, brothers and sisters that are out there, if you're struggling, please use the resources that are out there. President Trump set up this hotline, and it went into effect back in June of 2017, and it's still there, and I hope it stays there forever, because we have to stop the epidemic of 22 veteran suicides every single day. It has to stop. And the first and most important way we can make that stop, David, is by stopping the forever wars. Stop creating a situation that's producing this type of an effect on our veterans.
Yeah, it's so true. And another thing that I remember happening with President Trump is he signed a memorandum to eliminate 100% of student loan debt for permanently disabled vets.
He did, and that I think that's fantastic. If you are 100% disabled, why does the university or college cost you anything anyway? You've paid your price. The military owes you the right to go there. They owe it to you to go back and get vocational training and an education so that you can still be productive, even with your and I hate to use the word, but your disability. It was one of the best memorandums that he signed, was to eliminate the 100% of student loan debt for those injured veterans.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of issues covered, but what do you think is the most pressing need for, besides, of course, the big elephant in the room, which we're going to continue to unpack in different ways, which is ending the endless wars? But what else is on the table that needs to be done to help the veteran situation, the veteran community going forward?
I'll tell you, veterans are self-isolating by nature. However, the COVID restrictions, the COVID lockdowns are affecting the veteran community at a rate probably more than anybody is reporting. I get calls from friends of mine that work in the veteran services community on a fairly regular basis. And the calls always go like this: Dan, I've got a veteran that's in crisis. And they explain the situation, whether it's mental health, whether it's employment, whether it's housing, whether it's a brush with law enforcement. And then the veterans in our community rally around that veteran, and we escort him or carry him or drive him or do whatever we have to do to get him to the resources that are available. I think the most important thing right now is that we need to let veterans get back to living veteran lives. And I say that, and let me expand on it a little bit. Let's let Americans get back to living American lives. Let's quit these arbitrary lockdowns and restrictions that make people that suffer from post-traumatic stress injuries feel like they're prisoners in their own home. Let's get back to having an open and free society where you take care of you and I'll take care of me, and collectively we'll do what's right for ourselves, protect ourselves. That's liberty. That's freedom. And I think veterans really appreciate the ability to exercise that freedom, which is something that they bled and died for on foreign sand.
Well, very good. Dan McKnight, always a pleasure to talk to you, and it's been another good edition of Veterans Radio. A lot of stuff to think about, a lot of things people probably are not aware of. So always great to talk to you.
You as well, David.
And that's bringourtroopshome.us. Dan McKnight's group, bringourtroopshome.us. I'm David Gronowski. Remember, you can email me, hello@aneighborschoice.com. But for now, Godspeed.